Hello there. Tonight, we step through a great gate that remembers every pair of footsteps it has ever measured, into a city within a city that is learning how to sleep. Paper lanterns along the main avenue soften themselves to a warmer hush. Lacquered signs close their eyes. A thin ribbon of moonlight finds the canal and lies down. We will walk slowly, the way brooms walk, straight lines, no hurry, past racks of wooden sandals set in tidy rows, past curtains of indigo cloth that have been lifted and lowered enough times to know their manners. You will hear an abacus think in small clicks as ledgers settle to the last coin. A kettle agree to pour. The faint, wooden clap of the night watch passing at the edge of the hour. Hairpins will be lifted one by one. Combs will remember camellia oil. Silk will return to drawers that breathe faint incense. A ladle of water will darken the stepping stones and persuade the dust to rest. Screens will slide on their tracks without protest. Lamps will learn a calmer oval, then smaller still. We will visit courtyards that hold the day's heat the way a palm holds a cup. Rooms that are brushed, folded, and made honest again. Names exchanged in bows that mean, thank you, enough, tomorrow. Nothing sharp, nothing loud. Just corridors that understand their own length. Shutters that close without a thud. And a district that exhales together until even the cherry trees decide to stop rehearsing their shadows. Take a breath you do not have to defend. Let it out a little longer. The night will keep the rest. The great gate has a memory for footsteps. It has counted clogs and sandals, silk-soled tabi and tired bare feet, all day. Now, as dusk loosens its last knots, the hinges breathe and the wooden ribs settle. Lanterns along Nakanoko decide to be warmer rather than brighter. Their paper skins learn a honeyed hush, and the inked shop crests soften until they look painted on steam. A clerk at the threshold of a tea house bows a fraction deeper than at noon and draws the Norin halfway down, so the cloth can join the evening. Somewhere behind him, a kettle places a single, slow sigh into the room and then behaves. The avenue, which knows every story's posture, lengthens its shadow and becomes a corridor that leads towards sleep. You step once, and the boards answer the way seasoned-wood answers. Firm, unstartled, not interested in surprise. To the left, geta are racked heel to toe like tidy thoughts. Leather thongs remember ankles. A single strap waits to be retied in the morning, folded with its own patience. On a narrow bench, tabi that have learned a long day are set mouth up in a row, each pair propped by a sliver of cedar so air can move through them without making a speech about purity. A broom attends to the corridor with straight strokes that refuse to gossip. Dust, properly addressed, yields and goes to ground. The clerk who sweeps does not look up. The rhythm is older than attention. His brush becomes an abacus of motion. 1, 2, 3, and the floorboards, pleased with the count, shine with a modest thought of oil. At a writing desk near the door, a ledger settles under a brush. The paper is soft-fibered and takes ink as a pond takes a pebble, accepting, circular, no splash. A dish of sand waits for signatures to dry. The grains hold their breath and then release it, satisfied. The soroban clicks in phrases of 5 and 10. Beads gather and part like small committees that have learned to agree. Coins, reduced to their correct denominations, become little moons in a cloth tray. They do not clink so much as arrive. Names are written with the same care as weights. The ink line gives each character its room. At the margin, a note about a delivery that found the right door, and another about charcoal that should be ordered before the morning grows proud. The page accepts these errands as if they were polite visitors. Outside, the evening brings its own servants. Along the canal, a lantern throws a narrow silver that lies quietly on water. A boatman, teeth against a reed, nudges his craft into a berth he knows by scar and echo. Bamboo leans, then remembers its composure. A shopkeeper folds his awning with both hands, and the kind of attention that makes cloth behave even when no one is watching. The night watch passes at the far end of the street. Two Hayashiji speak once, twice, then hold their wood to their chests as if to apologize for the sound. Somewhere a bell counts the hour with a low, round weight that makes roofs feel well made. Between one sound and the next, silence lays a length of gauze across the street and fixes it with 2 pins of starlight. Within the rooms, objects retire with ceremony that prefers not to be noticed. Shamisen are unstrung to a friendly slack and slipped into cloth sleeves. Tuning pegs, relieved of duty, point at the ceiling like well-mannered questions. A fan is closed along the crease it was born to follow. Ribs line up as soldiers do when no parade is planned. Tea bowls, still warm enough to remember hands, are rinsed and turned upside down on a wooden slat, mouths guarded from dust. Incense ash is leveled in its bowl with a deft flick that writes a clean horizon. A tobacco bon, the small smoking set, has its ember persuaded into a dark agreement, tongs laid at a diagonal that will please the eye in the lamplight of morning. Nothing is rushed, and nothing is idle. The room chooses its night posture one gesture at a time. Hair ends the day before silk does. Kanzashi are lifted in the order that mornings prefer, set one by one into a shallow tray lined with folded paper that will not scratch. A comb, teeth smoothed by years and camellia oil, draws a last patient line, more like a thought organizing itself than like grooming. A single pin hesitates, then yields. The coil loosens without losing face. Hands distribute tsubaki oil the way a monk distributes light, sparingly, with respect for how little it takes to make a surface remember calm. Cosmetics do not argue. A brush is wiped clean along a cloth that never forgets its job. A small dish slides into its satin pocket. A mirror receives a breath and gives back less day and more lamp. The tansu accepts layers of silk the way a pond accepts falling leaves, without ceremony, without complaint, in the exact order that makes tomorrow simple. Lamps learn their lessons. Wicks are pinched to an oval that will not smoke. A cover slides over a paper lantern so the flame can remember humility. Oil is measured by sound rather than sight. 2 quiet glugs, then stillness. Hai no yojin, someone says, not to scold, only to remind the room of its better nature. Shoji screens answer the hand along their rails without resistance. Their paper carries the faintest bruise of passing shadows and will report them to morning as rumor rather than witness. At the threshold between corridor and court, a ladle lifts and tips a little water onto stone. Uchimizu, darkening the steps, persuading the last of the day's dust to lie down and sleep. You pass a courtyard that has learned to be cool again. Stepping stones widen under a wash of dusk. Moss accepts water like a compliment it has earned. A bamboo spout gives a syllable, just one, then thinks better of talking. Wind has set the leaves above on a slow pivot, and the shadows they write on the flagstones look like brushed characters that mean enough. In a corner, a sake keg wears its braided rope like a memory of spring festivals. It is stopped, stacked, and, because someone here believes in instructions given to objects, turned so the faded crest faces inward, toward the work that matters. A broom rests against a post with its bristles straightened by the palm, so they will wake in decent order. Along the street again, signboards take their bedtime. Rope straps loop snug. Wooden faces that shouted hours ago now read as quiet declarations. A name, a craft, a promise kept. Indigo curtains, Norin, hang like low clouds, still, thicker blue in the lamplight. A runner returns keys to a hook by touch alone. Each thin iron tongue finds its weight among its companions and is content to wait. The madam of the house, who knows where every hinge prefers oil and who has taught 100 doors to close without a thud, walks her last circuit. She touches nothing loudly. A note is left where a morning pair of hands will find it. New charcoal for brazier too. Repair the cracked rail on the north step. Remind the lantern maker that the spring river pattern should be cut finer. By the canal, the last escorts move like punctuation, easing a sentence to its end, commas that will not become periods until the gate says so. The Ōmon breathes and narrows. One leaf of wood draws nearer to the other. Guards look neither stern nor soft. They concern themselves with cadence, with whether the quarter is inhaling or exhaling. When a late customer drifts toward protest, the street corrects him with patience. The clack of clappers far off, the even stroke of a broom, the private grammar of doors taking shape. He reads the line as intended, bows to it, and his feet find the outside road. A lantern is snuffed with the hollow bloom that feels like a yawn. Moonlight, allowed a longer leash now, gathers itself along the ridge tiles and lies there, tame. Back in the quiet room where you began, the ledger page has dried. The brush sleeps on its rest. The soroban beads have coasted to their corners and decided to be round. The kettle, still warm enough to promise kindness, is set with its spout facing the wall, so it will not be tempted to speak before morning. A cushion is fluffed by 2 fingers and set square. The grain of the tatami runs straight as a good thought. Someone closes the lamp 1 more finger's width and listens to the room remember its best idea, that nothing is improved by hurry at this hour. Out in Nakanoko, the last footsteps fade into the kind of silence that keeps rather than devours. The gate holds, the canal keeps its silver, and the district, having brushed itself, folded itself, and said its small prayers to order, lies down and breathes. The great gate has a memory for footsteps. It has counted clogs and sandals, silk-soled tabi and tired bare feet, all day. Now, as dusk loosens its last knots, the hinges breathe and the wooden ribs settle. Lanterns along Nakanoko decide to be warmer rather than brighter. Their paper skins learn a honeyed hush, and the inked shop crests soften until they look painted on steam. A clerk at the threshold of a tea house bows a fraction deeper than at noon and draws the noren halfway down, so the cloth can join the evening. Somewhere behind him, a kettle places a single, slow sigh into the room and then behaves. The avenue, which knows every story's posture, lengthens its shadow and becomes a corridor that leads towards sleep. You step once, and the boards answer the way seasoned wood answers, firm, unstartled, not interested in surprise. To the left, geta are racked heel to toe like tidy thoughts. Leather thongs remember ankles. A single strap waits to be retied in the morning, folded with its own patience. On a narrow bench, tabi that have learned a long day are set mouth up in a row, each pair propped by a sliver of cedar so air can move through them without making a speech about purity. A broom attends to the corridor with straight strokes that refuse to gossip. Dust, properly addressed, yields and goes to ground. The clerk who sweeps does not look up. The rhythm is older than attention. His brush becomes an abacus of motion. 1, 2, 3, and the floorboards, pleased with the count, shine with a modest thought of oil. At a writing desk near the door, a ledger settles under a brush. The paper is soft-fibered and takes ink as a pond takes a pebble, accepting, circular, no splash. A dish of sand waits for signatures to dry. The grains hold their breath and then release it, satisfied. The soroban clicks in phrases of 5 and 10. Beads gather and part like small committees that have learned to agree. Coins, reduced to their correct denominations, become little moons in a cloth tray. They do not clink so much as arrive. Names are written with the same care as weights. The ink line gives each character its room. At the margin, a note about a delivery that found the right door, and another about charcoal that should be ordered before the morning grows proud. The page accepts these errands as if they were polite visitors. Outside, the evening brings its own servants. Along the canal, a lantern throws a narrow silver that lies quietly on water. A boatman, teeth against a reed, nudges his craft into a berth he knows by scar and echo. Bamboo leans, then remembers its composure. A shopkeeper folds his awning with both hands, and the kind of attention that makes cloth behave even when no one is watching. The night watch passes at the far end of the street. Two Hayashiji speak once, twice, then hold their wood to their chests as if to apologize for the sound. Somewhere a bell counts the hour with a low, round weight that makes roofs feel well made. Between one sound and the next, silence lays a length of gauze across the street and fixes it with 2 pins of starlight. Within the rooms, objects retire with ceremony that prefers not to be noticed. Shamisen are unstrung to a friendly slack and slipped into cloth sleeves. Tuning pegs, relieved of duty, point at the ceiling like well-mannered questions. A fan is closed along the crease it was born to follow. Ribs line up as soldiers do when no parade is planned. Tea bowls, still warm enough to remember hands, are rinsed and turned upside down on a wooden slat, mouths guarded from dust. Incense ash is leveled in its bowl with a deft flick that writes a clean horizon. A tobacco bon, the small smoking set, has its ember persuaded into a dark agreement, tongs laid at a diagonal that will please the eye in the lamplight of morning. Nothing is rushed, and nothing is idle. The room chooses its night posture one gesture at a time. Hair ends the day before silk does. Kanzashi are lifted in the order that mornings prefer, set one by one into a shallow tray lined with folded paper that will not scratch. A comb, teeth smoothed by years and camellia oil, draws a last patient line, more like a thought organizing itself than like grooming. A single pin hesitates, then yields. The coil loosens without losing face. Hands distribute tsubaki oil the way a monk distributes light, sparingly, with respect for how little it takes to make a surface remember calm. Cosmetics do not argue. A brush is wiped clean along a cloth that never forgets its job. A small dish slides into its satin pocket. A mirror receives a breath and gives back less day and more lamp. The tansu accepts layers of silk the way a pond accepts falling leaves, without ceremony, without complaint, in the exact order that makes tomorrow simple. Lamps learn their lessons. Wicks are pinched to an oval that will not smoke. A cover slides over a paper lantern so the flame can remember humility. Oil is measured by sound rather than sight. 2 quiet glugs, then stillness. Hai no yojin, someone says, not to scold, only to remind the room of its better nature. Shoji screens answer the hand along their rails without resistance. Their paper carries the faintest bruise of passing shadows and will report them to morning as rumor rather than witness. At the threshold between corridor and court, a ladle lifts and tips a little water onto stone. Uchimizu, darkening the steps, persuading the last of the day's dust to lie down and sleep. You pass a courtyard that has learned to be cool again. Stepping stones widen under a wash of dusk. Moss accepts water like a compliment it has earned. A bamboo spout gives a syllable, just one, then thinks better of talking. Wind has set the leaves above on a slow pivot, and the shadows they write on the flagstones look like brushed characters that mean enough. In a corner, a sake keg wears its braided rope like a memory of spring festivals. It is stopped, stacked, and, because someone here believes in instructions given to objects, turned so the faded crest faces inward, toward the work that matters. A broom rests against a post with its bristles straightened by the palm, so they will wake in decent order. Along the street again, signboards take their bedtime. Rope straps loop snug. Wooden faces that shouted hours ago now read as quiet declarations. A name, a craft, a promise kept. Indigo curtains, Norin, hang like low clouds, still, thicker blue in the lamplight. A runner returns keys to a hook by touch alone. Each thin iron tongue finds its weight among its companions and is content to wait. The madam of the house, who knows where every hinge prefers oil, and who has taught 100 doors to close without a thud, walks her last circuit. She touches nothing loudly. A note is left where a mourning pair of hands will find it. New charcoal for brazier 2. Repair the cracked rail on the north step. Remind the lantern maker that the spring river pattern should be cut finer. By the canal, the last escorts move like punctuation, easing a sentence to its end. Commas that will not become periods until the gate says so. The Ōmon breathes and narrows. One leaf of wood draws nearer to the other. Guards look neither stern nor soft. They concern themselves with cadence, with whether the quarter is inhaling or exhaling. When a late customer drifts toward protest, the street corrects him with patience. The clack of clappers far off, the even stroke of a broom, the private grammar of doors taking shape. He reads the line as intended, bows to it, and his feet find the outside road. A lantern is snuffed with the hollow bloom that feels like a yawn. Moonlight, allowed a longer leash now, gathers itself along the ridge tiles and lies there, tame. Back in the quiet room where you began, the ledger page has dried. The brush sleeps on its rest. The soroban beads have coasted to their corners and decided to be round. The kettle, still warm enough to promise kindness, is set with its spout facing the wall, so it will not be tempted to speak before morning. A cushion is fluffed by 2 fingers and set square. The grain of the tatami runs straight as a good thought. Someone closes the lamp 1 more finger's width and listens to the room remember its best idea, that nothing is improved by hurry at this hour. Out in Nakanoko, the last footsteps fade into the kind of silence that keeps rather than devours. The gate holds, the canal keeps its silver, and the district, having brushed itself, folded itself, and said its small prayers to order, lies down and breathes. The quarter takes care of its feet before it takes care of its sleep. At each doorway a rack waits with the patience of wood that has learned many sizes of day. Geta come home heel to toe, Saul's showing the small geography of streets. Thin dust from Nakanoko, a darker line where the canal path turned damp, a pale trace of powdered shell by the fan seller's stall. The thongs relax back into their own curves. Zori, straw and silk, settle beside them as if listening for a weather report that is already over. A boy with a cloth moves along the lower slats, clearing the ghost of footprints so tomorrow will not inherit anybody's hurry. He works from left to right, then back again, not because a rule says so, but because the rack looks relieved when order returns. Inside, soft cotton tabi are set to remember their shape. Pairs that have walked far are turned mouth up on a cedar bar so air can write its clean sentence through the toes. Stitches at the heel are checked with 2 fingers. If a thread has decided to forget its duty, a needle is threaded and the memory restored before the forgetting spreads. A shallow basin receives the pairs that need water's advice. Rinse, press, no wringing. The cotton does better when persuaded than when scolded. White toe caps meet a sliver of soap and return to their quiet dignity. Each pair is carried to a rod in the corridor where night drafts are polite and the lamplight cannot teach yellow. The hooks fasten with a soft tick, a little chorus that says, "Enough for now." Corridors are given back to mourning 1 line at a time. A broom of broomcorn stands taller than the boy who guides it, and yet it behaves like a pen in a steady hand. He pushes along the grain of the boards, never across, so the wood will not begin the day with a grudge. Dust does not fly, it agrees to be gathered. Where the floor changes to tatami, the tool changes too. A wide hake brush that knows the weave by heart, drawing slow, even lane so the straw will lie with the same mind it had when it was new. At thresholds the strokes shorten and lighten. Edges do not like to be bullied. A Churatori dustpan arrives on cue and accepts what the hour has brought to it. The pile is modest, the kind of modesty that comes from many small obediences practiced all day. The house is a map of water in little bowls. By each post a lidded oak sits with a ladle laid across its mouth, both cleaned last week and cleaned again tonight, because habits prefer companions. Hai no Yojin, says the calligraphy on the wall. Mind the fire. And the characters look pleased to be where their advice is kept. A ladle rises, tips, and returns. It is not a ceremony. Exactly. Only a way of telling the boards that somebody is thinking of them. Uchimiza darkens the step just enough that the night will not carry grit into sleep. Beyond the eaves, along the street, other doors perform the same small ring. Stones look richer afterward, as if they have been reminded of the quarry that made them. In a side room, a mat is lifted and turned to keep pride from making a hollow. The frame beneath it is examined the way a careful hand examines a friend's wrist. No hurry, fingers along the length, the question asked and answered without spoken words. Where a reed has frayed, a thin thread of rice straw is stitched through to teach it patience. The corner is smooth flat with the back of a knife. Edges like to be reminded that corners are villages, not battlegrounds. Along the base of a shoji, a man kneels and finds a paper bruised the size of a thumb. Rice paste, a patch cut a breadth smaller than the wound, and the panel looks as if it had taught itself to heal. Sound learns to be useful. In one long corridor, the broom's strokes establish the pace, a slow 3 that can be counted with breath. In another, a bucket is set down on a folded cloth so the floor will not learn dents. From the courtyard, the bamboo spout gives its one syllable and then behaves, persuading silence rather than interrupting it. Far off, the hayashiji speak their double note, and the wood carries without edge. 2 clacks become an agreement with the hour rather than an argument against it. Even the hinges have taken the lesson. When a door is tested, it answers with a vowel, never a consonant, and the latch decides to find its seat without drama. Racks ask for their last attention. A senior woman checks the line of sandals and sees at once where a pair has been placed shy of true. Her hand corrects by a width no coin could measure, but any back would feel in mourning. She pats the shelf as if it were a shoulder. The boy returns with a different cloth, oiled just enough to tell wood what kind of shine is respectable at bedtime. He follows the grain and lifts only what must be lifted, leaving the boards with their own quiet, unbragging light. In the corners, the broom goes back to the wall with its bristles combed straight and its handle turned inward. Tools, like people, are calmer when they face the room they serve. Outside, the street's feet finish their day too. A porter sets his pole on the rack where poles cool. A boatman's straw sandals hang from a nail in a pattern he invented and kept, heel to heel, toes away from the wall, so the straps will dry without learning a twist. At the Ōmon, a guard scrapes the edge of his geta on a clean stone in 2 exact passes. Removing the last road from the block before the gate can teach it to stay. The stone receives the little offering and keeps no record. The guard bows to the wood the way one bows to a teacher who has never raised a hand. By now, the floors have remembered how to be floors and not streets. The grain runs like water in a channel that has forgotten about flood. Tatamas smell a little sweeter where the brush woke the straw. The air itself feels pressed and folded like a clean cloth. A woman carrying folded tabi passes and leaves behind her the kindness of camellia oil, scarcely there. She pauses to raise a lantern cover 1 finger's width and make its oval humbler. The light obeys without sulking. In the next room, a small tray catches 4 stray grains of rice and returns them to the jar, not because anyone will notice, but because the room owes itself tidy arithmetic. When the work reaches the far end of the hall, the house is lighter by the weight of dust and heavier by the weight of promise. Shelves are square. Racks are true. Water sits where water belongs. The last pass of the hake draws a straight lane and stops at the exact plank where the boy began. He looks back, not to admire, only to confirm that the evening has been set down in the order morning will prefer. He folds the cloth into quarters and then into quarters again, corners meeting like good neighbors. The corridor cools by 1 degree, somewhere a kettle size, and chooses to wait. The floors shine the way a conscience does when it has done simple things well, and the district, feet bathed and put away, is ready to lie still and learn the dark. A tray learns the weight of evening before anyone speaks. Lacquer as calm as pond water, a cloth folded to a perfect square, a small pot that has known how to pour for years. These assemble themselves the way a sentence assembles when it already knows its last word. The kettle breathes once, a soft agreement, and the lid answers with a single tremor no louder than a moth. Leaves loosen in a porcelain jar and slide into the warm belly of the pot like a handful of patient rain. No whisk, no ceremony that asks for attention. Only the house kind of tea that tells the hour to sit down and behave. Cups are warmed as if they were hands. Each Yunomi receives a spoon of water, learns the shape of heat, and yields it back into a waiting bowl so the first pour will not surprise the lip. Steam writes a pale character that forgets itself at the shoji, and the room, pleased, lowers its shoulders. The pour is not a line but a counted breath. 1, 2, then 3, distributed from cup to cup, so every mouth will meet the same quiet. The color settles between straw and winter honey. Someone inhales and finds grass, roasted things, and the faint sweetness of work that has ended on time. Sweets, because the tongue remembers. A sliver of yokon is cut by a blade dipped once in hot water, so the edge will mind its manners. The slice stands like a small wall of evening. 2 sugared beans are set beside it, not as a promise, but as a courtesy, and a toothpick of cedar learns its place across the rim of the dish. Leftovers from a busier hour are wrapped in paper with a twist that knows it will be untied by a tired hand in a different room. Knots are taught to be confident, not tight. The tray receives these particulars and becomes a kind of map. Cup here, cup there, sweetness set at a diagonal to keep talk soft. Musicians are thanked the way strings are unstrung, without rush, without loss. Chemise and pegs turn down to a friendly slack. Bridges are lifted and slipped into their cloth nests. Silk remembers the corridor by scent and folds itself into sleeves that breathe a little camellia. The woman who tuned and tuned again all afternoon presses her palms around a cup as if it were a small stove. Her eyes close to the thickness of a blink, and a line across her brow unclenches by one shallow degree. A quiet thank you travels farther than applause at this hour, and the cup agrees by cooling into usefulness. The tray goes visiting. It pauses at the book where ink is drying, and the clerk receives a cup with the same careful hand that fed the soroban. It stops by the corridor where the boy has taught the floor its straight lanes, and he drinks standing, shoulders lowered, eyes on the brushed grain as if the boards were still learning. In a doorway, the Yarite accepts her share and uses the first sip to decide which hinge will want oil tomorrow. No one drinks quickly. Tea at closing is not thirst's answer, but the evening's punctuation. Small, even dots that make the page legible to sleep. Outside, the quarter matches the pace. A gust lifts an indigo Norin half a hand and lets it fall exactly where it was. The canal takes the lamp's narrow silver and changes it to a darker idea of light. Hayashiji speak from far down the street, wood on wood, then fold into a watchman's chest as if sound could be put away with keys. From somewhere high and wooden, a bell counts the hour with round weight, and the roofs settle, pleased to have their arithmetic checked. Between those notes, silence lays out a clean cloth for the next thing the night intends to do. When the pot is light and the cups are turned mouth down, the tray returns the room to itself. The kettle is eased to the side of the brazier, so its breath will not argue with the lamp. The tea leaves rest with a last glisten against porcelain and are thanked in the plain way objects are thanked here, by being set where morning will find them sensible. A cloth wipes the mouth of the pot, once, then once again, so memory will not crust. The cups line up like small moons with their shadows exactly beneath them. And in that tidiness the hour receives its orders. No drums, no speeches. Only the agreeable command of warmth taken, sweetness shared, and water returned to stillness. The day loosens first at the crown. Fingers find the hidden path through glossy coils and paws. The way a reader pauses at a knot they already know how to untie. Kanzashi, pins bright as small moons, are lifted in the order that mornings prefer, not hurried, not idle. A shallow tray waits with folded paper, so lacquer will sleep without scars. Each piece is set down with a breath's distance between neighbors. Kushi comb with its teeth turned inward. Kogai stick aligned to its own calm. Slender birabara that once trembled under lamplight, now resting like quiet thoughts. The hair remembers its choreographed shape and then, like a guest with good manners, remembers how to give it back. A comb is warmed in the hand before it speaks to a strand. Camellia oil, Tsubaki, leans in from a small bottle and draws a soft line along the teeth. The scent is almost nothing, a memory of leaf and rain. From nape to crown the comb travels in patient lanes, never dragging, never correcting by force. Where pins pressed, the scalp sighs. Where silk tugged, the wrist changes angle and the comb agrees. A few loose hairs gather at the comb's foot and are folded away into paper, a little cloud tied with cord for the ash jar that likes to keep such weather. The mirror receives what passes in front of it and gives back less day and more night. A sleeve lifts to polish a faint thumbprint from the glass, and the oval face there looks relieved to have edges again. Ornaments go to their beds. A small kiriwood tansu opens with that kind dry whisper that means it has learned to mind humidity. Drawers breathe cedar and faint incense. Kanzashi are nested on cotton, heads apart, stems aligned by size. A silken roll holds the comb family, teeth protected by stitched pockets that know their count. A parchment slip labels each layer with a neat hand. Spring set, festival set, every day, so that tomorrow will not need to rummage. 2 hair cords, dyed the color of late plum, are smoothed with oil and wound upon themselves, a kindness against fraying. The kamiyui's needles, a few slender tools that know how to persuade coils, lie across a cloth as straight as reeds, then are wrapped and bound with a tie that remembers how easily sharp things go wandering. Silk follows hair. The outer robe is lifted from the chair back with 2 palms under the weight, not from the collar, so the line will keep its dignity. Sleeves are laid edge to edge, the curve of each wrist matched to its twin, the whole length coaxed into a clean rectangle that remembers the body without clinging to it. A lining is checked for secrets the day may have left, powder dust, a stray thread, then brushed away with a hake that wakes only the cloth, never argument. Collars are sponged, not scolded. A sachet of incense is nested in the fold, so the drawer will smell like good manners when it is opened again. Layer by layer, the day becomes neat geometry and slides into the cool dark where silk is allowed to think quietly about tomorrow. Cosmetics in with courtesy. The rice powder bowl is lidded and its rim wiped once, then once again, so it will not remember anyone's haste. A tiny pot of beni, the red that knows a lip better than speech, receives a drop of water and closes with a satisfied click. Brushes are washed until they run clear, pinched to points between careful fingers, and laid to rest on their ceramic stand like cranes in a reed bed. The mirror's cloth returns to its peg. The stand is turned a finger's width away from the lamp, so silver will not be taught to tarnish by heat. In the corner, a small basin receives the last cool water of the night. It holds a brief moon and then gives it back. Finally, the hair itself learns sleep. A few drops of oil are warmed between palms and pressed, not rubbed, along the outer layer where the day shone. Strands are encouraged into a loose tail that will not argue with a pillow, secured by a tie that prefers kindness to command. A paper collar, the sort that keeps cosmetics honest, is folded and put away. Neck skin remembers air again. The last pin hesitates on the tray, then chooses its place. A cloth goes over everything the way snow goes over a garden, lightly, without making a speech about purity, only promising that morning will find its tools rested and in order. Beyond the shoji, the quarter answers with the same restraint. Paper lanterns have learned smaller ovals. The hayashiji far off speak their two notes and stop as if they, too, were being wrapped in cotton. A bamboo leaf taps a tile and decides against a second opinion. Hands extinguish a lamp with a practiced pinch and set the snuffer where the next hand will expect it. Hair at peace, silk squared, pins sleeping. The room breathes once more in a measured way, as if counting backward from 10. Then it settles, and the night inherits a quiet that has been earned strand by strand, fold by fold. Light learns humility before the district sleeps. On a low stand in Andon, wood frame, washi panels, waits while a hand, steady from many nights, lifts the shade and pinches the wick to a calm oval that will not smoke. Oil answers the little brass ladle with two quiet glugs, and then none at all. The flame agrees, smaller, rounder, a bead of patient gold. A cover slides back into place with the soft certainty of a drawer that has known its rails for years. The room exhales. Shadows stop arguing and settle into corners the way folded cloth settles into a drawer. Along the corridor, a line of tchatchen, collapsible lanterns with bamboo ribs, are persuaded back into their traveling bones. Each paper skin is checked for thin places, a thumb's width at a time. If a bruise of light has learned to show, a square of fresh washi is brushed with rice paste and laid on like a quiet answer. The ribs whisper as they close, a sound like a reed coat, shaken once and hung. Their cords are wound flat to keep tomorrow from tangling, and the lanterns go to their shelf by size, largest to smallest, as if answering roll call. One stays out for the night watch at the gate. The rest consent to darkness without sulking. Fire is not dismissed, it is instructed. Brazier embers are banked rather than beaten. Ash drawn over charcoal with tongs that never hurry. Air made scarce, so heat will remember itself without display. A kettle is edged to the rim so it may breathe and sleep. The ash bed is stroked level with a short bamboo spatula, leaving the kind of plain horizon that makes morning easy to read. The snuffer cup is wiped once and set mouth down. The wick trimmer lies beside it like a small pair of shears that has finished teaching. Hai no Yojin, mind the fire, is written where eyes will naturally fall when a hand reaches for light, and the characters look satisfied to have made their point without raising their voice. Water keeps watch in its own language. Oak buckets stand lidded at posts, ladles across their mouths, with scented faintly of clean rain. A boy tips one ladle to wet the stone at a threshold, uchimizu for calm and dust, then replaces it so the handle sits exactly parallel to the rim. In the yard, a covered well wears its cap square, rope coiled in a flat spiral so it will not teach itself knots in the dark. A small line on the ledger by the door says, in the clerk's neat hand, buckets checked, lids replaced, north eave drip corrected. The note is not for display. It is how a house remembers to keep its promises. The masters of light do their quiet circuit. A senior woman teaches a lamp the size it ought to be to keep company with sleeping silk. She lowers the wick a finger's width, waits, then another, until flame and cloth stop thinking of each other. She visits a shrine shelf and trims the candle there to the patient height of prayer. The incense bowl receives a tap that levels ash back to its even ground. At the account desk, the lamp is pinched until its oval belongs to numbers rather than stories. In the far bath, a wall sconce is quenched with a breath that leaves no smoke. Tools return to their hooks, snuffer, trimmer, oil ladle, all turned inward to face the room they serve. Out on Nakanoko, the hour announces itself with wood and wind. Two hayashiji clack together somewhere down the line, and the sound travels like a reminder, choosing the exact size of street it needs. A temple bell arrives as a low round weight. Roof tiles approved by lying flatter. Lanterns on the canal settle into narrow silver and then into memory. Reeds do their unimportant arithmetic of sway and answer, sway and answer. At the Ōmon, the gate guards read their posts by touch, not by torch. Hinges that will close later without a thud. Lock bars that have learned to be sure without being loud. Back inside, the work becomes finer, almost whispered. Wick fibers are rolled between finger and thumb to teach them roundness. A frayed end is trimmed no more than the width of a hair. Oil stoppers are tested for seated piece. 1, 2, 3, so no night drop will go wandering into wood. Paper screens slide and stop with the kind of decision that sets a room's breathing. Open enough for air to mind its manners. Closed enough for flame to forget ambition. On the shelf, a small pouch that keeps the striker stone and steel, Hichibikuro, is placed under a folded cloth. Even beginnings of fire are told to rest. When everything that can glow has learned to hum instead, the district grows articulate with dark. Hallway lamps choose the dignity of fireflies. Shop crests painted on paper shades take back their deeper indigo. A last lantern at the garden turn is choked until its oval becomes the size of a coin, then the size of a seed, then the idea of light with no need to prove itself. The hand that attends it waits a breath longer than necessary, to be sure the lesson holds. At the door a bar is lifted and laid down without complaint. The hinge sings its vowel and then keeps its counsel. The night inherits these obediences and arranges them into sleep. Fire sits where it belongs in ash and wick and memory. Water stands at its posts with ladles aligned. Paper remembers how to be strong by being thin. Wood remembers how to be patient by being straight. Somewhere a kettle gives one small syllable and thinks better of speaking. And you, listening from your own room, can let your breath agree with the new size of light. Soft in, slower out, until the lamp behind your eyes finds its smaller oval and stays there, tended, safe, and content. The house turns its face towards sleep, and the courtyards learn their evening. A ladle lifts from a cedar bucket and tips a slow arc. Water lands on stepping stones with the sound of silk lowered to a table. The dark spreads from each drop until stone remembers the quarry and becomes itself. Cool, even, almost blue. Moss at the edges takes the gift without commentary. Gravel accepts a light raking that draws calm lanes from threshold to basin. And the wooden lip of the bucket is wiped once with the back of a sleeve so no stray bead will think of traveling by itself into the night. A low stone basin waits where hands have always learned the hour. Its rim is worn to a friendly oval. A bamboo dipper lies across it like a sentence that has decided to end gently. Someone lifts the dipper, pours once over the left hand, once over the right, and lets the last thin ribbon of water return to the bowl. The basin replies with a single syllable and then forgets it. Beneath the eaves a rope of rain-chain links hangs quiet. Each cup dark with memory, but empty for now. A lantern pedestal keeps its square base steady and allows the paper shade above to glow only enough to teach shadows how to behave. Bamboo holds the corners of the world together. Slender poles, twined with hemp in tidy knots, make a fence that menders and does not scold. The ties, each in their hour, are turned so the weather will not pick at them. A screen of reeds is lifted a thumb's width to let the courtyard breathe. The potted pine in its shallow tray carries a year's worth of patience in its small, exact gesture toward the moon. 2 camellia leaves wear beads of water like discreet pins. One bead chooses to slip, and the leaf accepts the change without fuss. At a bend in the path, a short run of boards crosses a patch that likes to hold puddles when it can. Tonight the wood is dry and cool, and the grain shows as clear as lines on a careful palm. Footfalls pass without announcing themselves. Farther in, a bamboo spout feeds a narrow trough. The drop is slow enough that each fall is felt more than heard. After 3, there is a longer pause, as if the water were counting something only water needs to count. On still nights, a buried jar below answers with a bell no larger than a teacup. The sound rises, discovers it is not needed for conversation, and returns underground content. Plants rehearse their modest parts. Ferns keep their hands folded. green laid over green with the tidiness of stacked paper. A sprig of nandina lifts berries that the lamp decides to ignore. The plum, which in late winter will argue politely with the cold about blossoms, now draws its outline with a pen as fine as a hair against the pale sky. Even weeds have been taught where they may live. A single blade here at a stone's crack, a moss rosette there by a post's foot, left in place because it understands the size it is allowed to be. The air sorts itself by degrees. Close to the ground is stone, damp and faithful. At knee, the straw of the fence makes a dry whisper that a sleeve can borrow. Higher, where the eaves break the dark, there is the faint sweetness of camellia oil drifting from a room that has just gone quiet. Beyond that, night without ornament. Roof tiles taking moon in small scales, a chimney making its square of darker dark, a slice of cloud changing its mind over the canal. When a breeze travels the length of the yard, it lifts nothing, only tells the paper in the lantern that the world is still here and then moves on. Objects return themselves to usefulness. The rake is leaned with its teeth straightened and its handle turned inward to face the room it serves. The ladle finds the same angle across the bucket rim it found yesterday and the day before. Its shadow knows where to lie. The door sill is pressed with a cloth so the edge will not learn splinters. A folded pad is set beneath the latch to teach it to fall without a thud. In a corner, a small tray holds a broken twig, 2 grains of gravel, and a pin of straw. Things rescued from the broom, so they will not argue with bear saws in the morning. Sound keeps the ledger. From far along Nakanoko, the night watch allows 2 wooden claps to travel into the courtyard, then closes his hands around the sticks so no echo will go wandering. A bell speaks from the temple with a round weight that squares the roofs. Somewhere a boat nudges a mooring post and decides not to make a second remark. Nearer, a drop from the bamboo spout meets the trough at last. The surface adjusts and is level again. Silence writes the totals in the margin and allows a breath to move from one end of the yard to the other without tripping. Before the shoji are drawn, someone kneels by the threshold and persuades a line of grit to leave the track. The screen slides with a soft decision. The lamp inside lowers by a finger's width so that paper and flame will not start a conversation they cannot keep civil. The courtyard accepts its lesser share of light and seems pleased. Stones darken, gravel fades to a gentler thought, and the basin holds 1 thin moon longer than the sky can manage. A last glance corrects a crooked reed tie by the width of a cherry petal. Then the door is closed, the latch sits, and the yard keeps watch by doing nothing at all. If you stand there 1 breath longer, the measure offers itself, in softly as water meeting stone, out a little longer, as water leaving stone. The path is a sentence already finished. The basin knows its word and does not repeat it. The lantern remembers enough. And the night, having arranged its small obediences, bucket, dipper, rake, reed, writes a clean line through the middle of the quarter where sleep can read. Nakanoko practices a softer grammar when the last errands are folded away. Indigo Norin hang like clouds that have remembered their positions. Painted crests, busy at noon, now read as gentle statements. Just enough ink to hold the shape of a name. Water darkens the stepping stones where uchimizu has been done, and the street keeps that cool breath the way a sleeve keeps a hint of camellia oil long after the hand has gone. Doors are set to their night posture. Latches find their seats without complaint. Shutters close with the vowel of seasoned wood. Somewhere a single chachin is left to think, its paper letting the smallest bead of light through the brushwork as if the character itself were breathing. The hour presents itself with what first. Down at the bend a watchman lifts his hayashiji, touches the blocks together twice, and then gathers the echo into his chest so it will not bruise any window. The sound does not ring. It arrives, confirms the shape of the street, and becomes memory. A second answer comes inland from the temple, bell tone laid down like a round stone in deep water. Roof tiles approve by lying flatter. Dogs, who have opinions about many things, hold theirs. Even the canal seems to have read the schedule. Its narrow silver shortens into a darker line, and reads practice a sway no one will need to correct. Shadows put themselves in order. Rafter lines learn a clean diagonal and hold it. The angle of a eave tells the ground where to stop being bright. Signboards, looped with their own ropes, rest against posts as if they had agreed to spend the night listening. A boatman coasts toward his berth by remembering which plank answers which touch. He sets his pole without a knock, ties one half-hitch by feel, and puts his hands on the gunwale as a way of telling the craft it has done well. The last footfalls before curfew do not hurry. They settle into spacing that frames the silence rather than cutting it. Near the Ōmon, the great gate breathes. Its leaves are not yet closed, but they have the posture of closing, like a book held half-shelved while a reader finishes a sentence. Guards make their circuit in a key lower than talk. A hinge is oiled by habit rather than need. A wooden bar lifts and sets down to show it remembers how to be certain without being loud. When a late visitor approaches with a pocket full of leftover daylight, the street teaches him the new hour. 2 soft clacks, the even glide of a broom far off, the unshowy steadiness of a lantern that has been trimmed by an experienced hand. He reads the page properly, turns, and lets his steps join the outside road. Small things keep the ledger. A vendor's pole, leaned on its rack, no longer smells of steam, it smells of bamboo. A fishmonger's sign, cloth rolled twice and tied, leaves a thin crescent of salt in the air that suggests work rather than appetite. Farther along, a shamisen case rests in its sleeve against a post. The silk has the faint memory of festival on one side and of quiet money on the other, and between those two ideas it chooses rest. A cat inspects the lane as if it had written it and finds nothing it would change. From a lattice window, a thread of speech escapes, thinks of becoming gossip, and decides to stay gratitude. Air arranges itself by layers until breathing learns it. Down at sandal height there is stone and a trace of water. Midway is straw fence and the dry rustle of reed screens that have been lifted a thumb's width to let the courtyard sleep. Higher is lamp smoke that never quite became smoke and the disappearing sweetness of tea. Above that, night without ornament, rooflines stepping into each other, a cable of cloud crossing slowly, stars indifferent in a patient way. The district asks nothing of the lungs except regularity, and slowly, until the ribs meet their first good answer. Out a little longer, until the ribs agree to listen. The night watch returns, not to insist, but to keep the lesson true. Hayashiji touch once near, once far, announcing distance rather than danger. In between those notes the hour is kept by other instruments. Drip from a bamboo spout into a trough no larger than a sleeve, the soft clap of a norin lifted and allowed to fall, the hush of a broom's last lane in a corridor you cannot see. From the temple, late and kind, another bell tone rolls across rooftops. Its roundness leaves corners feeling less like corners. A flake of moonlight catches on a lacquer sign and slides off, undecided. When the gate closes at last, it does so with the restraint of a good reader reaching the back cover. Wood meets wood and chooses agreement over drama. Keys do their small metal conversation and hang where they always hang. The path beyond the bar finds a new edge and seems relieved to know where it is. Inside the quarter, doors receive their final hand. Wicks are taught their smallest ovals. The last ledger note is made about buckets and well caps and a north eave drip corrected. Outside, the road resumes its own grammar of cartwheel and sandal and distant talk, growing thinner with every pace away from the wall. Stand in the middle of Nakanoko now, and there is very little to watch and exactly enough to hear. The street has become a long, shallow bowl, and the sounds that belong to it, bell, block, broom, water, fall in and settle without jumping out again. Paper and wood and stone agree about what the hour means. The canal keeps its darker line. The gate keeps its promise, and the district, having put away its stories and counted its breaths, lies down in a shape sleep understands. A room returns to itself the way a tide returns to the shore it already owns. Tatami are brushed in long, parallel lanes that remember the day's feet but do not keep them. The hake moves with the grain and then rests. Straw rises to a calmer nap, sweeter by a breath. At the thresholds, rails are persuaded free of grit with a folded cloth. A fingertip runs the track once, twice, until the shoji can travel its course without clearing its throat. Paper catches the lamp as a soft square, no brighter than the answer to a simple question. On the low alcove, the tokonoma, a scroll is rolled and tied with a narrow cord. The knot taught to be confident, not tight. The flower vessel is emptied, rinsed with 2 small turns of water, and set to shine without boasting. Cushions learn their roundness again. Zabuton are lifted and patted with 2 hands from the edges inward, air folded into the cotton, so bones will meet kindness in the morning. Each cushion is turned a quarter to prevent pride. Seams are checked for threads that thought of wandering and are reminded, gently, of duty. A pair of neck rests, lacquer cradles padded in cloth, are inspected for displaced bows and oil spots. A cloth with a single drop of camellia persuades lacquer back to quiet. A low table is wiped with strokes that start at the center and move out, the way a breath leaves the body when it is certain of sleep. Where a ring from a cup had considered permanence, a warm cloth and patience convince it to be a memory instead. Bedding takes its careful geometry. Futon that aired earlier at the Engawa are brought in, shaken once so they will not talk in their sleep, then laid and folded with corners meeting like good neighbors. The cakebuton, the cover, learns its straight line and is wrapped in its sleeve. Ties cross and tuck flat, so no knot will instruct a sleeper's skin. Kaya, the green mosquito net, is rolled from its ceiling hooks into a smooth length and bound with 2 bands that remember their place. The hooks themselves are turned sideways so they will not learn to scratch. The straw mat beneath the pillow is brushed short and quick, a kindness to the nape. The pillow is tapped lightly at its ends to distribute buckwheat hulls into an even, consenting shore. Smell is edited until it becomes sentence. Incense ash in the small koro is leveled with a bamboo pick, its surface neat as a field awaiting rain. A pinch of lighter ash is sifted over the place where a coal had insisted, and the color learns evenness. The lamp is lowered a finger's width to teach shadows not to argue. The oval of light tucks itself close to wood and paper. The air keeps 3 notes only: clean straw, a suggestion of camellia, the quietest breath of sandalwood that stayed after thanks were spoken. Smoke is not allowed to become narrative. It is a footnote, remembered by the room and then released. Tools stand where tools are useful and nowhere else. The tobacco bon ember is walked into sleep and the tongs cross at a tidy angle. The lid of the ash bowl rests where a hand can find it without looking. A tray is set beneath the eave to collect what the night might forget to hold. 3 grains of gravel, a pin of straw, a thread. In the morning it will be empty or honest. A small broom returns to the wall with its bristles combed straight and its handle turned inward to face the work it understands. The water jar in the Mizuya kitchen is topped to the breadth of a finger. The ladle lies across its lid as a final, horizontal proof. A note in the margin of the house book: north hinge oiled, second screen patched, tea jar moved forward, waits under the lamp like a seed that knows which season is next. Paper and would rehearse their promise. Shoji slide and seat with a sound that is more thought than noise. A panel with a small patch accepts its new square of washi as if it had been born with it. Lintels feel a cloth, and the cloth comes away indifferent, a sign that dust has remembered its place. The inner threshold is pressed with the heel of a hand, so the bar will settle later without a thud. Keys are counted by touch. 1 for the store chest, 1 for the ledger cabinet, 1 for the outer door, and hung with their iron tongues turned inward, polite. A single Chachin is left to think in the corridor, its wick pinched to a bead. The shade glows just enough to show a path to water and not enough to teach wakefulness. The last disorder is spoken to at the corners. Under the low shelf, a stray hairpin is found. Bowed as if apologizing, it is wiped, counted back into its family, and given paper to sleep upon. A thread is snipped from a hem, so it will not learn to pull a story out of silk. A weight straightens a curling scroll in by the width of a cherry petal, then is removed so the paper can believe it did the work alone. In the track of a screen, a grain of sand is chased with a breath and a folded square until the rail is a clean idea. Each small victory goes unadvertised. The room is not improved by triumph, only by order. When all has been done, the room tries on its mourning silently. Tatami lie with their lanes like water that has agreed to be river rather than flood. Cushions compose themselves in a square around the table, as if waiting for names they already know. The alcove stands empty in a way that teaches fullness. The shoji shows the darkness outside as a patient gray, and the lamp, taught its smallest oval, hums like a well-fed insect. What can be put away is put away. What must be left out is left so on purpose. Breath now fits the size of the place, and softly, as a brush meets paper, out a little longer, as ink settles to matte. Outside, the street keeps its ledger, 2 wooden clacks from the watch, 1 round bell from the temple, the tiniest note of water finding stone, and the district folds itself into the shape sleep prefers. Inside, the last hand turns the wick, squares the cushion, and lets the latch find its seat without a word. Rooms have become rooms again. Not stages, not accounts, not doors for errands, but places where air and objects rest in agreement. In that agreement, the night can finally count without fingers, and you can close your eyes knowing that everything within reach has learned how to be still. At last, the quarter finishes its sentence. The Ōmon closes the way a book closes when the reader already knows the ending. Wood meeting wood without a quarrel, iron learning its weight, and choosing not to boast. Keys lift, speak a small metal syllable, and hang where they always hang. Outside, the road resumes its long, thin grammar of sandals and cartwheels. Inside, Nakanoko shortens to the size of breath. Indigo Norin rest like folded sky. Painted crests, busy all day, become soft nouns. A single corridor lamp is pinched to the idea of flame and left to remember the path to water. Rooms keep their promises. Tatami lie in their brushed lanes, straw sweet by a breath. Shoji seat in their tracks with the confidence of habits that help rather than rule. Cushions wait in a square, corners taught not to argue. The low alcove holds its clean emptiness like a bowl that believes in mourning. Tools face the work they serve. Broom with bristles combed straight, ladle across a lidded bucket, tongs crossed at a tidy angle over the ash. The ledger sleeps in a cedar drawer that smells faintly of rain and ink. The soroban has guided its beads to their corners and decided to be round. Courtyards cool by degrees. Stepping stones darken where water asked them to forget the day. The basin keeps a polite oval of night and one small moon that will not be there when anyone looks again. Bamboo knots the air into order and then relaxes. A berry jar answers the bamboo spout with the tiniest bell and returns to listening. Gravel holds the rake's calm lanes. A reed screen is lifted a thumb's width. Enough for breath, not enough for doubt. The garden lantern lowers its wick to the size of a seed and waits for silence to grow around it. The last circuit is walked without words. A hinge is persuaded toward kindness. A north eave drip is checked and declared corrected. A note about charcoal is left where the morning hand will find it and nod. The Yarite touches the door she has taught for years to close without a thud, and it remembers. In a dressing room, hairpins sleep on paper. Combs lie in their stitched pockets. A mirror turns slightly away from the lamp, so silver will not learn pride. Silk rests in its drawers like water in its banks. Somewhere a kettle keeps one quiet syllable and then thinks better of speaking. Street sound chooses its final instruments. Two hayashiji touch and then are held, distance announced, not danger. A temple bell lowers a round weight onto rooftops, tiles approved by lying flatter. Canal water shortens its silver into a darker thought of light. A boat rubs a post once, politely, and stops. A cat edits the lane with blinks and decides the night needs nothing from her. The great gate breathes once. The way sleepers breathe when the pillow has finally become agreeable, and the wall learns stillness all the way to its foot. By now the district has the shape sleep prefers. Paper remembers how to be strong by being thin. Wood remembers patience by being straight. Fire remembers humility by being small. Water remembers watch by standing where it belongs. The quarter, brushed and folded, says its last prayer in objects. A door that seats without complaint. A cup turned mouth down. A lamp taught its smallest oval. You could stand in the middle of Nakanoko and hear very little and understand everything. The bowl of night holding what matters, nothing jumping out. If you are listening from your own room, you can borrow the measure the quarter has practiced all evening. Breathe in softly, the way water meets stone. Breathe out a little longer, the way light leaves paper when the wick is pinched. Let shoulders learn the hinge that does not thud. Let thoughts line up like sandals on a rack. Heel to toe, then rest. Yoshiwara sleeps. The hour keeps itself. The gate knows its door. We'll leave you here with paper, wood, water, and a small patient flame keeping watch. Keep the district's rhythm, and softly, out a little longer, and let the room you're in become as tidy as these lanes. In a moment the screen will go dark and an hour of gentle ambient music will begin to carry you the rest of the way. Sleep well.